everybody. This is Niraj Chhabra with Sidebar Advisors. Welcome to today's episode. Today, we are here with Bill Singer. Bill Singer has been practicing. He's actually celebrating his 50th year in the area of law, and he is the founder and director of LGBTQ Family Law Institute. He is also the founding member of Singer and Fuden, an organization really specializing in LGBT family law and rights of the LGBT community. I thought it would be helpful to have him discuss not just his professional career, but really what he's been doing for the state of New Jersey and the community at large. So, Bill, thank you very much for coming on today.
My pleasure to be here, Niraj.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's a lot that I wanted to cover regarding your impressive career, but let's kind of start with your background, where you went to school, how you got interested in the field of law. We'll take it from there.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Highland Park, New Jersey. Actually, I'm going to be 75 this year, and I've only lived in 2 counties in New Jersey my whole life, though I've traveled the world. So while I was growing up in the 1950s and early 60s, I grew up in a Jewish family, and my parents were very insistent that we have a profession. Because if you were a Jewish person in those days and you went into a large corporation, you could be discriminated against. There were still country clubs that we couldn't belong to, hotels that would not admit Jews. So they're very protective about that. So I have 2 brothers. So we ended up with 2 lawyers and a doctor. I went off to Columbia Law School in New York and ended up having a clerkship in New Jersey with a New Jersey judge. And then with the clerk from the year before, and back in 1973, we opened our own office. I was at that point married to a woman. After about 8 or 10 years in that practice, the practice had grown. We were like 6 or 7 lawyers, and I came out as gay.
Okay.
I got immediately expelled from the law firm, even though I was a founding partner. Wow. They paid me everything I was entitled to, but they said, no bank is going to hire us if we have a gay attorney, and people are going to avoid us, and we just can't afford it. And you have to go out, you have to leave. So why I even say this, it was so interesting because my parents wanted me to have a profession because they thought I would be discriminated against because I was Jewish. No, it was not discriminated against, I was gay. So I was fortunate because I could at least pick up, move down the road a piece, and open my own office because I had a profession. So I wasn't, so it was starting at scratch again in a way after 10 years, but it gave me some footing. I had been representing members of the lesbian and gay community even when I was in the law firm, but I decided that that was really a niche that needed to be filled, and so I started my own firm. That's where I try to direct my law practice. That was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I ended up helping to found the Hyacinth Foundation, which is still in existence as the leading New Jersey organization for HIV and AIDS. I was head of the legal committee. I did dozens of deathbed wills in hospitals all around New Jersey and in New York City. I earned the moniker of being called the Angel of Death because when I was coming to visit,
things weren't
it was over. It was a horrific experience, and it was also a very emotional experience, and it was also a good lesson for me in my practice of law, because I learned how to deal with people in very significant, difficult situations and to put on my game face and go in there and deal with it. So, Niraj, you just want me to go on? I'll keep on talking.
Yeah, no, this is all really interesting. So I guess before we move on to, how you transitioned into your new firm, I do have some questions about, your experience. So I guess the first one is you said you started this firm with some partners. Did they know you were gay at the time?
No, I was married to a woman.
Right. So this was.
I didn't know I was gay.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
But you said that you were representing gay clients and they had no issue with that. They just didn't want a gay founding member. Is that what the issue was?
They didn't want a gay lawyer. Founding member, partner, associate, no gays. I mean, I was representing, at that point, the only gay people that had children were people who were in heterosexual marriages and were leaving because they decided that that was not their orientation. And a lot of ex-spouses tried to deny the visitation and or custody of the children to their ex-spouse because they were gay. So those are the type of cases that I was fighting then. And they were very messy. Fortunately, the New Jersey courts, unlike courts in other states, didn't recognize that being gay was a reason why you could not be a parent. So, a lot of times, disgruntled ex-spouses just raise that as a negotiating tactic. We're going to not try and deny you the right to see the kids, or you can take less alimony. So it was pretty brutal.
Did this impact you personally? Did you and your ex-spouse have children of your own?
We did not have children. I do have a daughter now, but that's through adoption later.
Okay.
No, it was, we were married 10, 11 years. We had a good marriage. And I've learned a lot in the 40 years in between. And I learned recently that there's a difference between who you might be sexually attracted to and who you want to live your life with. So, for example, I can say I'm bisexual, but I'm homo-romantic.
Okay.
I want to be in a relationship with someone of the same sex long term. But my sexual orientation, I can be attracted to men or women. I think that's why you find that a lot of people say bisexuals, they just can't make up their mind. But, because they may be attracted to men, they may be attracted to women, but who do they want to build a life with? And that's sort of different than who you're attracted to sexually.
Yeah, that's fair. So this happened. What was the fallout like with you and your partners? I mean, was it amicable despite the fact that they were kicking you out? I would imagine it's hard for you not to be resentful towards these individuals, correct?
Sure. Well, when I was determining whether I was going to come out as gay, I figured I was going to lose my marriage, I was going to lose my job, I was going to lose my family, and I would lose my friends. And was I willing to take all of those losses to be authentic? And I decided I was.
You were prepared to take that risk.
Yes. So I did lose my marriage. I did lose my job. My family disinherited me.
Wow.
Because the money would go out of the family because you're gay and you can't have children. So we're not going to leave you any money. That was the overt reason. And then, some friends stood by and some friends didn't. But, when you're transitioning into a whole different world, those friendships that I had with my wife, with other heterosexual couples, I was able to maintain them, but I really wanted to be a gay man in the gay world. So I lost all of those things. And it was still worth it. It was definitely worth it. Do I have any resentment as to my former partners? There were 3 former partners. One died of a heart attack as a young man, like 2 years later. One committed suicide.
Wow.
5 years later, and the other one's still around. But, I've shed any anger that I had. I understand where they were coming from. That was 1981. And that was a very different world than the world we live in now. This certainly wouldn't happen if I was a member of that same firm in 2022. Now people want gay partners. They want diversity.
Sure. And a lot of that has to do with some of the work that you've put in to make that change in the state, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So, okay, so you did have a falling out with your partners, and you mentioned your family. Have things with your family improved since then? Like you said, it was a relatively long time ago. Hopefully, things have patched up since.
I have no connection with my biological family.
Okay.
They say you have your biological family and your logical family. I have what they also call a chosen family. So down the road in a relationship that I no longer am in, my partner at that time had a 15-year-old daughter. This is in the 1990s. I adopted her. And even when my relationship with my former partner ended, I still had my daughter, who's now married, and I have a grandson. And I'm very close with her biological mother, and we sort of have our own chosen family. So it's worked out well. I have a family that appreciates who I am.
That's good. So you were able to move on and kind of start your own family. At what point, how long of a gap was it between you were let go from your original firm and you starting your new firm? I mean, was it a matter of days, weeks, months?
I took off maybe 2 or 3 months. I think I got, all right. So I was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco when Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro were nominated. And I came back, that was in August of 1984. And I came back from that. And that's when my law partner said, you have to, you're out of here, you're gone. So I took off from basically September 1 to January 1. And January 1, I moved down the road to Montgomery Township and I opened my own office.
Okay. And what was that like? What did you decide you were going to still focus on gay rights and, custody issues? Or did you say, I'm opening up my own shop and I have to kind of take whatever cases come through the door?
Oh yeah, you got to, anyone who's starting their own law firm, you take whatever comes to the door. You end up doing the closing for the UPS man and the divorce for the FedEx guy because they come in your door. You talk to them, But I was looking, I did a lot of work in the lesbian and gay community. So, people started to know that I existed and that I had a specialty there. And people were very closeted then. And they preferred to go to an attorney who understood how they lived and how they loved. And all the work that I did through AIDS, estate planning and estate administration, led me into the gay more clients in the gay community. But of the 1980s, early 1990s, lesbians realized they don't need a man to have a child. They just need sperm. And so we had a lot of same-sex female couples creating children. It was like a lesbian baby boom. And they came to me and said, we have no legal relationship with each other. And the non-biological mother has no relationship to this child that she is raising. Can you help us, paper this up and, create documents? I would do co-parenting agreements and living together agreements and all sorts of powers of attorney and, any type of document that could prove that their relationship. And then in the early 1990s, the New Jersey judges realized that a child could have 2 parents of the same gender. That before that, you can have 2 moms or 2 dads. That's goes against the heteronormative model. But they decided that they could allow that. So we started to do adoptions. They were called second parent adoptions by the second parent, so that both women would have a legal relationship with the child. They had to do a home study as if they were adopting a child out of the state system or from a stranger, which included, background checks and child abuse clearance and their tax returns and interviews with their neighbors and their family and their employer. I mean, they had to do all of this in order to establish the relationship between the non-bio parent and the child. And we were able to get it. And so then the child had a relationship with both of the moms, but the mom had no legal relationship with each other. This is sort of interesting. Over time, after the Massachusetts Supreme Court in 2004 said that same-sex couples could marry in Massachusetts, New Jersey realized that they had to do something, but they were not ready to swallow marriage. So they gave us what's called domestic partnership. And that allowed the couple to go down to the municipal building, and it was sort of like registering for a dog license, but you pay $28 and you write it down a couple of things and you became New Jersey domestic partners. So that allowed them to have a legal relationship with each other. And that also did away with what was the most discriminatory part of New Jersey law for same-sex couples, because there's a New Jersey inheritance tax. You inherit from your spouse, there's no tax. But before that, or your domestic partner, but before that, same-sex couples had to pay a 15% inheritance tax on
Correct.
anything they inherited from their same-sex partner for which they were not legally recognized. So
in
being able
addition to
do
all the
domestic-
other things that they were denied.
right, well, other things we could paper over, like the right to make medical decisions, or the right to, but this inheritance tax was really cruel. I saw people that had to sell their house because 8 months after death, you owe 15% of the value of the house
Value.
to the state. Yeah, so it was that was a major step forward in 2004.
And you were very involved with, within the community and everything like that. So what hand did you have in shaping some of the new laws that came out and things of that nature, through whether it's through the LGBT Family Law Institute or just doing things on your own?
All right, so let me address the Family Law Institute. So in 2003, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which is in San Francisco, got a grant from the foundation of the family that owned Levi Strauss. And they held was going to be a one-time meeting in Washington of attorneys around the country who specialized in working with lesbian and gay and transgender families. And that was so eye-opening for me and so wonderful, because here I was practicing in a fairly rural part of New Jersey. This is way before, really a facility with the internet. And we had, I was doing work for these types of situations. I couldn't call up somebody down the street.
There was nobody to bounce ideas off.
There was no idea. So this is a wonderful thing. And so that meeting, and there were like 30 of us from about 30 different states, all met. And then we continued to meet and have a listserv. And in 2009, I said, well, this is wonderful for the 30 of us, but we're not the only 30 attorneys around the country that do that. And I encouraged the National LGBTQ Bar has an annual meeting called Lavender Law. And I suggested to them that we do a one-day family law meeting for experienced attorneys who do LGBT family law. It is an off-the-record meeting. It's not, everyone is vetted. They have to have a certain level of experience, because it's not a teaching thing. It's a peer-to-peer, sharing. And so that became the Family Law Institute. And I worked very hard finding attorneys in hostile or underpopulated places, because they really needed more contact. If you're an attorney in San Francisco or Manhattan, you've got other people who do this type of work.
Sure.
But you're in Lawrence, Kansas, or in Montana or North Dakota, you're really isolated, as I had felt isolated. So that's what drew me to this. So we started that in 2009, and that is still ongoing, and it's a very vibrant national organization. Then in 2013 or 14, I was in London, again with a colleague who does the same type of law. And she said, well, we should try that here. So the next year, we had the first meeting of the United Kingdom, Ireland Family Law Institute. And that has exploded and is wildly successful. And at that meeting, there was someone from Australia said, we want this in Australia. So then I went to Australia and I set it all up, and there's an Australia FLO. Then the people in the rest of Europe said, well, we want that. And not just, it's fascinating, because it wasn't just Western Europe, France and Switzerland and Germany, etc. It was also attorneys from Poland and Bulgaria and Estonia, and who do this type of law, who really feel so isolated and need moral support in what they're doing. So that was totally fabulous. Now then, that group has exploded. And
how many members are you up to now, internationally?
I don't know. We don't count. I haven't counted.
Okay, but it's more than 30.
Oh yeah, but then Latin Americans wanted it. So we did, just before the pandemic, we had the first Family Law Institute Latin America, with attorneys from all over Latin America, that is conducted in Spanish, in meeting in Argentina. And so this little germ of this idea that I started with has really exploded internationally, and I'm very, very proud of it. So for example, just this past Monday, I was on a Zoom conference with family law institute attorneys from all over Europe dealing with surrogates from Ukraine who are escaping Ukraine and coming into Poland and going to give birth to someone else's child. And what are they going to get? A Polish birth certificate? And how are people who are the intended parents who live in Ireland or Germany or the United States, how are they going to deal with it? How are they going to find each other? This could
things
never
vary
happen.
State to state within the US. I could imagine how complicated things would be when you're crossing borders.
Absolutely. And, if the biological father is not on the birth certificate, Ireland will not recognize and give that child Irish citizenship. Now, another country won't require that, but each country is different. So it was wonderful to see that this Family Law Institute, these attorneys were all interacting in this international crisis we have, which has put all of us on edge, that we could really do something because we had this connection. So that is one of the major accomplishments I feel in my career, and it just makes me smile every time I think about how I've connected all these attorneys around the world. Sitting in my little office in Bellmead, New Jersey, just on my laptop, putting in stuff, and it all exploded.
That's really cool.
I had early in my career been a registered lobbyist. I got my feet wet initially through Common Cause, but then I got hired by the New Jersey Environmental Lobby to lobby in the New Jersey legislature for that. And I also have an expertise in election law, and I've represented political action committees, many of them for decades now. So I've always had my foot in legislation. And whenever I felt that there was a need, I know how to write legislation, and I know how a bill gets passed. So
were these paid positions, or were these things that you were doing kind of extracurricular, because lobbying is
all my advocacy is pro bono.
But you mentioned, being a lobbyist for environmental groups, that was also.
Well, when I was a lobbyist for environmental groups in the 70s, I got paid.
Okay.
But then I took that expertise and used it in the LGBT movement, and that I didn't get paid for. Though I must state that I do have a client, a straight client who has no relationship to the LGBTQ community, but had come into a lot of money and said to me, "I'm so impressed by the work that you do. If there's things you want to do and no one's paying for it, I'll pay for it."
Wow.
So she has underwritten my trips to Argentina or to Europe or to Australia so I can go do these things. So I do have a little support.
And that's obviously important. It's not just important to get support within the community, but you need to have support from external participants as well. Otherwise, it just doesn't gain any traction. So I'm glad to hear that you have clients that are supporting your endeavor as well. How are you finding time to balance, running a law firm as well as, these endeavors that you're taking on?
Well, I love what I do. So.
By the way, you also have to be a dad. So.
Right, and how do I balance it? I don't know. I feel very, very lucky that I was able to create this law firm that matches my personality. I live out here in a fairly rural area. I have 8-minute drive, to work every day. Where my law partner says, "You see more deer than cars on that drive," which is true. I have a wonderful staff. I'm able, because I have now many years experience and a wealth of knowledge, to be able to delegate a lot and handle a lot of transactions all at the same time. And I don't have to do any marketing. Because I've been doing it for so long, and I have a very loyal stable of clients that keep on coming back with, as situations arise in their lives, and my reputation in the community. So I want to get back to talking about parentage for a bit. So after 2007, when New Jersey got civil union, the court said, if you have a non-bio parent, you don't have to do a home study anymore, but you still have to have a judicial hearing and background check and child abuse clearance. But once
is that the same? criteria for heterosexual adoption?
No. In heterosexual adoption, you have to do a full home study and all of this. And, it was always like, why do we have to do a home study? Even if you deny the adoption judge, this kid's going back with the same two parents in the same house. It's not like, you're putting an unknown in here. But anyway, after we had got civil union and marriage, by virtue of the heteronormative legal presumption of marital presumption, it's presumed that the spouse of the woman who gave birth is the other parent, and that person's name is put on the birth certificate.
I see.
So I learned that a birth certificate is not proof of parentage. Just because a person's name is on the birth certificate doesn't mean they're a parent. There was a case that came to the New Jersey Supreme Court in 2012 about a heterosexual married couple where the wife could not produce eggs and couldn't carry the child. So they purchased an egg and they got a carrier, and they used the husband's sperm to create embryos. And when the child was born, the wife of the sperm donor husband wanted her name on the birth certificate. And that went to the Supreme Court in New Jersey, who said, no, there are only 3 ways you're a parent in New Jersey. You gestate the child, you contribute genetic material, or you get a judicial order. So, I was dumbfounded. I think all of us are dumbfounded. We think that on our birth certificate, it says who our parents are. But that's not true. It's not accepted. So, for example, I would have a same-sex female couple where one of them used an anonymous sperm donor and had a child. Both names are on the birth certificate. A non-bio mom, I said, you really have to get a judicial order to confirm your parentage, or to prove your parentage. And they would say, this is a lesbian tax. This is, you're just running extra legal fees. My name is on the birth certificate, etc. So I had one of those couples where the non-bio mom's name was on the birth certificate. She got cancer. She went to Social Security to get disability payments for her 2 sons. And they said, well, prove you're a parent. And she brought out the birth certificate. And they said, that is not sufficient. So,
incredible.
So, access to government benefits, ability to travel, and not worry whether you're a parent or not, that someone's going to question you in an emergency room in North Dakota at some point, or who knows what. So I'm trying to convince particularly my same-sex female couples, you really got to do this. You really got to do this. I don't want to adopt my own child. This is my child. So I came up with this euphemism. We're not adopting a child. This is just a confirmation. It's a confirmatory adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of sold the day in a way. I had a client who works in Union County. She's the head of the LGBTQ office in Union County. And she was doing one of these second parent adoptions. And she was telling all the politicians in Union County, this is what I have to do. And they said, this is ridiculous. And the day of the hearing, they all showed up in the courtroom. It was filled with, all these politicians witnessing that although this woman's name is on the birth certificate, she still had to go through this whole court process and these background checks and be questioned by a judge. So they turned to me and I said, can you do something? So I wrote a bill to streamline this whole process, called it confirmatory adoption. And that bill said, if you were married or in a civil union at the time of the birth, and both of your names are on the birth certificate, and you can prove to the court satisfaction that no one else has any parentage rights, we normally send the receipt from the sperm bank. There's no background check. There's no home study. There's no judicial hearing. There's no child abuse clearance. You just send in your paperwork and they send you back an order saying that you're both the parents. So now you have a judicial order that's subject to full faith and credit in all 50 states by virtue of this streamlined process. So I've been able, through my expertise of lobbying and writing and then knowing about LGBT parentage, found a way that same-sex couples can easily get what they need to protect themselves now.
Congratulations. That's a huge piece of legislation that you were able to get accomplished. So,
and this term confirmatory adoption also has gone like wildfire. It's used all over the country. Now everyone, well, we're going to do confirmatory adoptions. And my clients had such bad feelings about the word adoption.
Right, because it's their own child.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I was writing the law, I thought, well, I could call it this judgment they get a confirmatory judgment of parentage. But I decided everyone in the world knows what an adoption is. And as distasteful as that term is, when you're in an emergent situation and you can pull out a document that has adoption on it and your name, everyone's going to understand that. And so I went with adoption anyway. And so I had a client who was going to Greece to visit her father and with her 3 kids, and they were going through immigration in Athens at the airport. And they wanted to know, well, where's the dad and who's the? She pulled out her adoption order. Well, you know, in Greece, they know what an adoption is. Oh, you're the parent. Okay, it's right here in this order. No questions.
So it was the convenience of being universally recognizable that that made you kind of keep that word in the title.
Correct.
Okay. Did you receive any type of resistance when trying to get this passed?
No, but you know, in 2004, when we got domestic partnership, the legislature was not ready to recognize rights for gay people. And even in 2006, when the New Jersey Supreme Court said gay couples are entitled to the same rights as married heterosexual couples in New Jersey,
right, but not marriage.
But they wouldn't give us marriage. They
Right.
gave us civil union, a separate but equal, you know, status. And then they tried to pass marriage equality in the legislature, defeated. Then they passed it, and Governor Christie vetoed it. So, you know, it's been a long struggle, but now the legislature is very open to LGBTQ issues in New Jersey. And it's more like, oh, is this what you want? Sure, we'll pass it. So once I wrote that confirmatory adoption law, I got Senator Scutari, who's head of the Judiciary Committee at that point, to sponsor it. It just went right through.
That's fantastic. So congratulations again on that. Any threats that you're seeing in the community, at least within the New Jersey borders or even at the federal level?
So I get this question all the time from my clients. You know, are they going to do away with marriage for same-sex couples? Are they going to do away with marriage equality? Will my marriage still be recognized? And, you know, we had the Obergefell decision in 2015 that said all states have to give same-sex couples the right to marry. But since then, Justices Thomas and Alito have said in more than one occasion that they think that that decision was wrong and it should be reversed. And when there was the argument recently in the Texas abortion cases, or no, the Mississippi abortion cases, Amy Coney Barrett said, well, you know, stare decisis, recognizing past decisions is important, but it's not inexorable command. We can't overturn past decisions. So already I had now 3 justices on the Supreme Court that might be amenable to overturning our right to marriage. So I looked, well, you know, the right to marriage, what's the status in New Jersey? So in New Jersey, in 2013, a very brave judge, Mary Jacobson in Trenton, found that the civil union law was inadequate and same-sex couples had to be given the right to marry. Governor Christie sought an injunction on that and went to the New Jersey Supreme Court. And the New Jersey Supreme Court said, we only give injunctions if you think you're going to win, and we don't think you're going to win. So as a result of Judge Jacobson's trial court decision in 2013, same-sex couples started to marry in New Jersey. That was the only basis on which they were marrying, not a decision by an appellate court, not a statute. You know, if you went to the clerk's office and they looked up the statute and you're a same-sex couple, they would say, well, it's not in the statutes that you're allowed to. So I decided we needed a fix. So I sat down and I wrote legislation to change the marriage statutes in New Jersey so it would be clear that same-sex couples could get married. Because I just felt we were in a too tenuous a position just relying on a trial court decision.
So you felt that even though nobody was threatening, you know, these
immediately,
right, they could potentially do it in the future, given the current state of some other parties.
Another trial court judge could find differently than Judge Jacobson. An appellate court could overrule what she said, you know, based on, who knows?
So even within New Jersey, there was no uniform court system or rulings that that would protect everybody.
Or no statute.
No statute.
So I wrote this law through the strong advocacy of Garden State Equality. They approached Senate President Sweeney, who felt that he had made a grievous error when he had voted against marriage equality as a senator and wanted to make it up. And so he became our prime sponsor.
Wow.
And again, what do you want, guys? What is the LGBT passed through the legislature? Murphy just signed it in January this year. So now it's in the statute books, not just Judge Jacobson. Now we have in the statute books that marriage equality is the law of New Jersey. So our marriages are protected.
Are there other parts of the country where they're experiencing some sort of similar issue or just as vulnerable?
Well, a lot of places that are hostile to same-sex marriage.
Right.
They know they have to do it. They're trying to somehow separate the benefits of marriage with the ability to marry, and say certain benefits should only be available to heterosexual married couples. I mean, nothing ominous at the moment, but there was a case, in Arkansas where they refused to put the spouse of the woman who gave birth on the birth certificate. There was a case in Alabama where they refused to recognize an adoption order from another state. And, under full faith and credit, you're supposed to. And it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled 9-0 that Alabama had to recognize this. But meanwhile, this poor non-bio mom had to litigate her rights to be a parent all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Wow. What's next on your docket to try to continue the advocacy of the LGBTQ community?
One of the things I'm working on now is insurance mandates about infertility. I have worked on this legislation before, and we've gotten where if New Jersey controls the health insurance policy that's being issued, there's a mandate that certain coverage, if you're infertile, has to be covered. But it's based on the model of what they call medical infertility. Same-sex couples, single individuals, trans people are socially infertile because they can't, given their status, with their partner, or they're single, they can't have a child. And we operate in the feeling that everyone should have the ability to create family one way or another. So we're now working on revising the insurance mandate for infertility coverage to include same-sex couples, single individuals, anyone who's socially infertile or medically infertile would be able to be covered. You have a lot of the large corporations already doing this. If you work for Apple, you can get this, and you work for Google, but you work for an employer, with 50 employees, and you have a Blue Cross policy from New Jersey, you don't get that type of coverage.
So these companies are paying for it out of pocket as an additional employer benefit, but insurance companies themselves are not recognizing it. Is that correct?
Right. And it's a very expensive process. So I do a lot of work on assisted reproductive technology because I started with same-sex families, but now most of my clients are heterosexual or are using surrogates to have children. It's a very complicated and costly process. And I was part of the team that wrote the gestational carrier law in New Jersey. So we would have a system where it was regularized and everyone knew, if you did this and you did that the intended parents would be the legal parents at the end of the process, and the carrier would be compensated, but she would have, and her spouse would have no rights or responsibilities.
And where is that sitting right now? How far are you in the?
Oh no, that's law.
It is law now. Okay,
so that's another law I helped create.
Wow.
That's about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. So somebody today who is socially infertile will have the same rights through the insurance carriers to get this stuff done.
No. They have the right to. This is a gestational carrier law, so it just regularizes if you're using a gestational carrier, that the intended parents' rights would be respected, and the carrier would have no responsibility for the child. If you entered into a contract, you had certain requirements, etc. So that is a gestational carrier law, so that that whole process now, there's a statute in New Jersey to be guided by. But beyond, and so socially infertile couples or medically infertile couples do use carriers, and so they are protected. But as far as getting insurance coverage, that's what we're working on.
Okay. How far along into that process, the process for that, are you?
We're just beginning to write the legislation. I hope to get it passed during this present legislative session, which is a 2-year session. So it'll be 2022, 2023.
Okay.
We'll see. It's done. Similar legislation just passed in Colorado and Illinois.
So hopefully they could use some of that to kind of pave the way.
Right, and say other states are doing this. You're not
right. It's not that New Jersey would be the first.
Right.
So you've obviously added, statutes. You've gotten confirmatory adoption passed, and now you're working on the insurance mandates. What of your many, many accomplishments to the LGBTQ community would you say is your proudest moment, if you could identify one?
Well, certainly one of them is the Family Law Institute. That I've been able to connect lawyers internationally, all over the globe, who do this type of work and can consult with each other and also get support from each other. And so I'm very, very proud of that. I'm also very proud of some of the legislation that I authored that became law, that is going to be lasting protection for the community. I'm very proud of all the work that I've done to help same-sex couples can have protection on their parentage, protection as to their rights as to each other, inheritance rights, all of that. It's been a total sea change since the days when I was fired from my law firm in 1984 to today. It's like, it's hard to believe.
But it's such a different world, largely due to the efforts of yourself and people like yourself who are, willing to put in the time to make this happen. So thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much for educating me as well. There's plenty of things that I did not know, and it's very helpful even as a financial planner to be aware of.
No one knows that a birth certificate is not proof of parentage.
Correct.
We all think
yeah, exactly.
That's my parents' names.
But
just because they put the husband's name on the birth certificate, it's rebuttable. And they do a DNA test and they find out it's the mailman. It's not proof.
Sure. No, that was a big eye opener for me as well. So thank you. Any advice for LGBTQ youth or allies who are wanting to make a difference and maybe we're in the same shoes as yourself, not fully out yet, or just facing some challenges?
It's very worthwhile to be authentic to who you are. As difficult as it may seem, and as all the rejection that you may get initially, who wants to live a fake life? My God, one of the reasons I came out when I did is I said I didn't want to wake up at 50 and realize I had just dissipated and wasted all this time and not been who I am.
Great
advice. And then you have to be constantly learning. I'm now I used to go speak to the organization PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. It's been around for a long time. For parents, particularly who are having a problem with their children's sexual orientation or gender identity. So 20, 30 years ago, I'd go, it's all about my daughter's a lesbian. What does that mean? My son is gay. I'm never going to have grandchildren. Now I go to those meetings. Those people don't show up. Now it's my daughter's gender queer. What does that mean? My son says he's trans. How do I deal with that? So we've moved in a whole different direction and starting to recognize issues that we didn't recognize even 10 or 20 years ago. I mean, I didn't know about gender nonconformity. I didn't know that I always thought, you're male or female.
Right.
Now I realize we're on a spectrum, and now we use pronouns differently. I have a lot of gender non-binary clients. I also have now clients who are polyamorous. That's a whole new way of people are constructing their lives, this intentional community of getting together more than two people and trying to then advise them on how to protect themselves as a group and make sure that everyone is treated fairly. You might have three people in a relationship, and two of them are married. So the third, they want to make sure that the third person in their estate planning and their purchase of real estate, all of those things are being treated equally. So I would say keep your mind open because things are changing every day.
I appreciate that. That's great advice, especially the part about being authentic. I really like that. So, Bill, thank you very much for coming on today. If anybody is interested in learning a little bit more about either your practice or the work that you're doing, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, then go to my website, which is Singer for Dunn, SINGERF as in Frank, E, D as in dog, U, N as in Nancy. And look me up. I'm great with email. I love mentoring and helping younger people and people with issues, give them guidance. That's been the goal of my career. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Niraj. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.